This is Joanna Lilly. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Since its inception in 1949, Mental Health Awareness Month has been a cornerstone in addressing the challenges faced by millions of Americans living with mental health conditions. Although this month of recognition has been in existence for a while, stigmatization around mental health still exists. Throughout the month of May, we are bringing you episodes from the parent perspective to highlight this special month. Welcome to the Parent Series, brought to you by Success is Subjective.
It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilly.
Today's parent guest is Michelle from New York. Michelle talks about the journey that led to having to find a program for her son. What you won't hear during this interview, which we talked about offline, is that she was really clear in talking about the need for a parent to also make changes and really be involved. What that means is that parents need to take stock in their parenting approach, which most likely will need to be adjusted, especially if they're looking at treatment programs for their young adults. So this is in my own words, not Michelle's. Parents have to own being a part of the shit too. It's not just about their kid needing to change. So let's not wait any longer. I want you to hear what Michelle has to say. So here's Michelle. Well, Michelle, thank you again for being a guest on the podcast for the Parent Series, specific to the Success is Subjective podcast. So if you're okay with us just jumping right in, why don't you tell us a little backstory on what was going on with your child prior to entering treatment?
Sure. Thank you for having me, first of all. To try to make this as brief as possible, our son was the happiest, easiest baby, toddler, child. Everything was perfect until one day it wasn't. All of a sudden in fourth grade, he no longer wanted to go to school, was petrified to even think about going. It was to the point that I wasn't even comfortable sending him because he was in such a state. So we ended up getting him tested, and it turned out that he had very severe ADHD and anxiety. And the reason he did not want to go to school is because he was so nervous because he couldn't figure out what was wrong. He couldn't sit still. He couldn't focus. The educational stuff that used to come so easy to him was all of a sudden becoming very challenging. That being said, he comes from a high-achieving family, has a sister that's a superstar, very smart father, and he just felt awful about himself and very scared about what was going on. So getting to the bottom of those issues was very helpful, at least for a starting point. And all of a sudden, things started to kind of decline again, and he was getting older at this point. Some of the things that we were seeing was a lot of lying. He was having some social issues at school. We found that he was able to make friends. Kids always liked him. He had trouble keeping them. He was doing something that would, piss another kid off, and he was taking it really hard. A few times he had stole from us because he wanted to be better at a video game. So he was using our credit card to purchase things for apps and games. And, he got in trouble at school a few times, and we just saw things starting to go in a very bad trend downward. We were seeing a therapist. We had a team of doctors and everything. And unfortunately, it was just getting to a point that things were starting to get out of control. Then you add weed into the mix, and, he was telling me how much he really loved it. That scared me, not because I don't think that smoking weed is age appropriate in high school. It's because of the way he spoke about it and how he loved it. This was a kid that I was always concerned because he found pleasure from external sources, whether it was shopping, whether it was a sugary food or carbs. He was always looking for that fix. And I was always petrified of when he got his hands on drugs for the first time, because I had a funny feeling he would be off to the races. Then on top of it, we never knew where he was. We never knew if everything was going to be okay. We didn't know if he was going to get in trouble. I was riddled with anxiety and a lot of fear about what could go wrong. I've heard terrible stories about kids making an impulsive decision and, they end up taking something and it kills them. And I just was not willing to take that risk. Either was my husband. And truthfully, in the bottom of my heart, I felt like there was something else wrong that I wasn't getting answers about. There was just something about the behavior and how black and white it was that just made absolutely no sense to me. We were going to top doctors, and still no one could explain some of the behaviors to me. It just got to the point where life became unmanageable in my house. It was a war zone. There was chaos and fighting, and it was too much. And his safety was a big concern. And that is the point that we decided that he needed a higher level of care. And that's when we decided to send him to Wilderness.
And how was that experience for your son? And how was it for you?
For my son, I think he knew very well something was wrong. So he knew something had to change. I don't think he could get out of his own way at that point. And, things were just getting too deep for him that he just couldn't get himself out of the hole. I mean, he's a very good child, with a big heart, and he's smart and everything, but things had just gotten to be too much. I was a wreck. I mean, my husband was literally concerned that he was going to come home one day and find me dead from a heart attack because I was so stressed out all the time. I took on this role of fixing and rescuing him from everything because I just wanted him to be happy and him to be good. And, it took a lot of therapy for me to learn that that's not how it works. He needs to control things himself. He needs to handle them himself and want it for himself. So, it was a really, really rough and challenging time. We don't know people that did this. At that time, I had a daughter applying to Ivy League colleges. This was not in our wheelhouse. And truthfully, we heard terrible stories about Wilderness. So we were scared, and I basically walked around and cried 24 hours a day.
So it sounds like, just to kind of circle back and confirm, like you're teeing this up like, hey, we had to make a pretty serious decision. We were really concerned about this particular type of treatment. And it sounds like really your biggest fear during this time. And so I'm just seeking clarification. It sounds like your biggest fear was that your son was going to make a really impulsive decision with consequences that had a pretty significant impact. And because of that fear driving you, you were in a situation yourself. Now it's kind of like this domino effect where you are really in a bad spot, not putting your oxygen mask on yourself, like they say, right? Like really just being worried, sick about your son, what to do. And then the juxtaposition with what your other child is going through and how you're dealing with your son. It just sounds like fear was really the biggest driver in what was going on in your life at that time.
That's exactly correct. I mean, there was just so much fear that I couldn't even function. I mean, the truth is, my biggest fear was that he was going to die. I just thought something terrible was going to happen. And, we've seen it happen to other kids in the blink of an eye. We didn't think he was going to hurt himself. That's not something he was doing. But, kids make a quick decision and it could either ruin their life or end their life. And the problem was that the fear of that, we knew we had to do something. Even though we were fearful of what that may look like, at the end of the day, we weren't going to let him destroy himself. It just wasn't going to happen on our watch.
Yeah. So I know you kind of alluded to some of the types of resources that you were seeking out for your son and also for yourself throughout this journey, like leading up to him going away to treatment, and then also kind of hinting at some of those resources that maybe you tapped into once he was in treatment. So who did you, as the parent, lean on for support during that treatment journey for your child?
So, even when he was home, I was having therapy sessions because truthfully, I didn't know how to parent a lot of the things that were going on. It was a complete opposite of what I was used to with my daughter, who I was very similar to as a child. And I didn't know the right way to do things. And through therapy, I learned I wasn't doing things the right way. And, my way of trying to do things was just fixing everything for him and rescuing him and really just trying to do everything to make him be okay. And, that just was horrible for many reasons. But I did find the most help when he did go away to treatment because those therapists, they understand the breadth of having a child in treatment. That is something that even the top doctors in all the cosmopolitan cities we've lived in, they were not exposed to. And truthfully, they missed a diagnosis. So it wasn't until we sent him away that things really fell into place, because he got a diagnosis that we were unaware of. And that explained to me all these things that I was feeling in the pit of my stomach that was not right. And I would say something all the time to doctors, these top doctors that we were going and spending a fortune, and they just didn't agree. So that therapeutic piece was very, very helpful. And also leaning on the other families that we met while our child was in treatment, that was helpful, because you don't hear people talk about these sort of things, certainly not in our circle. And I do think there's still a stigma attached to mental health, and it's not something that people are willing to talk about, which is a shame, because there's so many that are struggling. And sometimes just knowing you're not the only one in this horrible situation just gives you some sort of hope.
Yeah, that stigma is still very, very real. So I'm going to ask two quick questions,
Sure.
and then we'll kind of end there. But the first thing, kind of on the heels of what you just said, if you could give any advice to a parent who's kind of going through this right now, similar to what you were describing of like all of the outreach, all of the resources, still kind of scratching your head, like what is going on? What advice would you give a parent right now?
First and foremost, there is hope and there is help. You're going to have your days where you just feel like everything is over. And I had many of those. There is help available and there is hope for your child. I mean, my son is a complete success story. And, from the hell of it to where he is now with straight A's in school and thriving and just the most beautiful human being. So that is very important. Another piece of advice I would give is trust your gut. If you feel something is not right, it isn't right. And you should keep pushing for it, because if I would have let it go, we wouldn't have had a diagnosis and a lot of things just would have never made sense. So, as a parent, if something isn't connecting for you, question it and question it again.
That's great advice. And you kind of alluded to what I was also going to follow up that question with, was just kind of talking about the definition of success, how you were envisioning success for your son as he was growing up and how that probably shifted, especially during his treatment journey. But it sounds like now, as you would describe him, he's doing really well. So I'm just curious from your perspective, if what quote unquote is successful for your son, if that definition has changed now that he has been through the treatment journey.
Sure. And it certainly has, because, I've learned a lot along the way as well. Success for him means that he is happy, that he is comfortable in his own skin. It means that he's feeling at peace. It's that he feels fulfilled, that he finds something to do, a career path, whatever it may be, that allows him to feel that fulfillment in his life. That's what success looks like for me. And that's not what I would have said at the beginning at all. But at the end of the day, back to the mental health thing, if you don't have your mental health and if you're not happy and at peace, you have nothing. So I feel very strongly that I just want him feeling good and comfortable in his own skin and feeling secure.
That is a great vision for success for your child. Last thing that I'll throw out there, and I can cut this off too if you are not interested in sharing it, but if there is anyone in particular that you would like to give a shout out to, you did mention like, hey, the therapists in this program like really helped. If there's anybody that you want to name or a role that you want to identify, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of tip your hat to anybody that helped support you during this journey.
Sure. First and foremost, I would say Judy Rabinowitz. She was our educational consultant. She was my rock. She really was everything. There would have been zero chance my son would have left this house if it wasn't for her. She is what made me feel safe. She was the one who allowed me to be able to put my head on the pillow every night. And I wouldn't have been able to do any of this if it wasn't for her. So first and foremost is Judy. Then, I'm thankful to the therapists that worked with him at Telos, which is a boarding school, and Arthur Kleinfelder, that's the name of the therapist he was seeing, who just got through to him on a level like we've never seen before. They bonded immediately. He was a miracle worker with my son. Also, one of the owners of Telos, Kristen Williams, she was just a saint. She was there for me. She supported me. She understood me. She heard me. So, all in all, with all the staff, we really had a very, very positive experience. And that wasn't necessarily happening when he was home.
Well, we'll make sure that we are giving that spotlight to those programs and professionals in the show notes for the episode, in case anybody is curious. Michelle, thank you again for taking the time to be on this podcast, but also share a part of your journey, which is really vulnerable. And so I just appreciate you taking the time to share your story.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. Put a face with a voice by accessing their interview on the newly formed successissubjective.org website. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email Joanna at joanna@successissubjective.org. Be sure to check out the collegealternative.org and lilyconsulting.com websites for additional resources outside of podcasting. If you are listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe to the show. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Last but not least, Success is Subjective is listener-supported, made possible by our team and by you. You can support this podcast by joining the Patreon community at patreon.com/successissubjective. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. While information is everywhere, how do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.